Welcome back to the Beat the Often Path podcast. I'm your host, Ross Palmer. On this show, we showcase unusual success stories to help you think outside the box and find inspiration in your life and your career. Now, when I started this podcast, Spencer Kitson was exactly the type of person that I was hoping to find. You'll notice that this is one of the longer episodes we've had on this podcast because this South African man hasn't just lived one story, he's lived at least 4 or 5. He built a successful career in music from the ground up, then completely switched gears to get into mining and mineral trading. But that was just the beginning of his entrepreneurial journey. Truly, this is a fascinating tale that almost defies belief. It's like the kind of story you'd find in a movie, but it's proof of all of the many different seasons that one life can have and all of the many different roads that lead to success. So here is Spencer Kitson. So, Spencer Kitson, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Correct.
All right, seems easy enough. Now, you reached out to me because you've got an absolutely crazy story, which is one of the things that I hoped for when I started this podcast. I was hoping that I would get some unusual things coming at me by doing it, and you seem to be an example of this. I read your little bio. It's absolutely nuts. You've done a lot of crazy things, have had a very non-linear path, to say the least. So tell me a little bit about what it is. What's your journey? And you got to keep it interesting for these people because they're already drifting off the side of the freeway right about now.
So yeah, I think I'm kind of a bit of an unusual sort of person. At a young age, I've always just had older friends, and I think that's probably was part of it. So didn't really finish school, just purely by choice, not for any other reason. I've always been interested in sort of going at things head first. So as much as I loved learning in school, I just seemed to clash with teachers. So I think immediately from that point, it kind of was immediately obvious that, I wasn't going to follow the normal trend, which I certainly haven't. So yeah, I enjoy pushing different boundaries, trying new things, and really learning through experience. I believe building different skills and like you said, non-linear is adventurous. Let's say it that way. And I think that's the best way to learn is by trial and error, at least in my circumstances and the way I've grown.
Sure, and you're calling us now from South Africa. Where in South Africa?
Correct. So I've grown up in Johannesburg. Was born in Cape Town, which I would have loved to have grown up in Cape Town, but Johannesburg's where I've called home for many years. Yeah.
And there's some kind of difference that we should know about? That Johannesburg is markedly worse than Cape Town, or?
So Cape Town is a bit more European. So coastal city, okay. Johannesburg's inland. It's actually was part of a gold rush. So they just found a bit of gold and ultimately built a city in the middle of the country. It's close to our capital city. So it tends to be a bit more where the financial hubs are. But Cape Town, from a beauty perspective, and I think just in terms of lifestyle, is quite different. A bit more European based.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And do you call it Joburg, or is that ridiculous?
Joburg's perfect. I think it's with the regular.
I think I read that somewhere. God knows where or when.
You'd fit right in. That'll
sometime. I saw that. I think it was a book in middle school or something like that, Joburg.
Yeah.
So give us the brief overview. What have you done? So you've been outside of the beaten path. So what was your professional arc?
So I started actually as a sound engineer. I left school early, literally wrote my last exam 1 year. I still had another 2 years to go. So I guess most people would call it dropping out. I wrote my last exam, put my pen down, jumped on a plane and went down to one of the other coastal cities in South Africa. And I learned one-on-one with a sound engineering lecturer who'd actually written a lot of the coursework for most of the schools in South Africa. So I had a great opportunity to learn from someone very hands-on. I spent 6 months learning directly underneath her, spending a lot of time. And this was a time when music was still really in that transitional phase of analog to digital. So I'd learned
Mm.
in analog studios, which I think I was probably one of the last of a dying breed then.
Wow.
Um, and on completing that, I actually taught some of my friends. So a couple of my friends got interested in what I was doing, and I think it was really the passion that I had for it, because school I found was very theoretical, and if you're not good in learning that way, you might be considered sort of the naughty kid or disruptive or anything in that sort of category, and immediately you outcasted.
Mm.
Sit in the corner, go outside, like don't disrupt. And I think for me, I'm someone who wanted to ask the questions and learn. So when I learned full hands-on, I just took it and ran with it. It felt natural to me, and so I think a lot of my friends picked that up, and because the lecturer I'd learned with, she had just started her own sort of school. So although she'd taken me on one-on-one, she was actually expanding. So I had an opportunity to teach a couple of my friends that had joined the same course. So I think that was really like great for me to see that transitional change. I then came back to Joburg, and immediately through her relationships, I had an opportunity to work for quite a big record label in South Africa. They have had probably one of the biggest studios in Joburg at the time, and geez, I think the first week I was there, I was working on some award-winning albums and meeting like
Wow.
artists that although they weren't my generational type music, they were a lot more the older generation, African jazz, a lot of African sort of poetic type music. But nonetheless, these were stars. And unbeknown to me at the time, obviously still young, it goes a little wet behind the ears. Um, but that's how I actually started. And I think through that, I mean, I think the first week I was there, someone even brought up the comment like, "Who brought the kid to the office?" kind of thing. So I
Nice.
really started at the bottom, which was great. Although sort of at a good level at the bottom, I guess. Um,
Yeah. The
I
bottom of somewhere good.
correct, and I ended up transitioning. I mean, I'd known a very popular South African group when I was a lot younger, so that was also an insight to music that really spurred me going in that direction. Um,
Mhm.
so I'd seen a lot of those kind of things. I'd been on stage, I think, at like 13. Um, just it was just part of my youth. So it felt natural. Then I think after working in that environment for some time, I'd obviously started earning a bit better. I set up a studio of my own with my parents. My parents had actually helped me set up my studio, and it was a completely new ball game. So I'd gone from fully analog to all of a sudden now having to understand digital. So it actually took me a year to learn how to operate my own studio. Um, And so, yeah, I started up by, I think, just getting a couple of my friends that were still in school at that time. I was sort of catching them after school. And we started recording like that. And eventually it snowballed. So I think about a year into that and learning how my setup worked, I'd actually attracted a lot of big artists. Um, Number one, I would start going to a lot of events. And I think at this time, hip hop was very new, so there was still a bit of a divide, I think, sort of a racial divide in a sense, where
Mm.
a lot of people wouldn't go to these events just out of, I think, being different or standing out. And I did. I mean, I was interested in hip hop. So obviously, I fully engaged it, I embraced it. I started filming events. So I thought, how could I get friends of mine to start coming to these events and feeling comfortable? So I literally just went to a store, bought a very regular camera. It had a light on. We just started going into the clubs and filming. And so slowly I just come from being a sound engineer to now having built a studio to actually now trying to expose an industry and try to bring it into light. And yeah, I mean, I think, geez, there was yeah, just remembering back to it, it was really great. It was quite frontierial, like in a sense. Radio wasn't playing
Sure.
hip hop, so it was exciting times. I mean, and we ultimately grew from having these small little cameras to purchasing production level cameras. I then got invited to a radio interview one day, and that slowly ended up becoming its own radio show. So we ended up having an alignment of a radio show to the brand, which was broadcast to 55,000 users a week. And that went for 2 years. I
Wow.
started lecturing, so actually once a week I was responsible for a sound engineering faculty, and I started training youngsters in how to sort of get into the music world, but I think with a bit more of a spin on just sound engineering. Mm. So I would give them real life scenarios that we'd actually worked on in studio. So I was trying to bring the real world to them. And I think once we had the radio station, it started exploding for us. We went from working with just the regular friends of mine and people still in school to some of the top artists in the country.
Wow.
So yeah, it was great. Um, but eventually I kind of got sort of mixed up with the wrong things. Just I think burnout, the amount of sort of demand in the hours operating a studio. We're eventually running almost 24/7. We
Mm.
had about four engineers, a couple of different producers that we were relying on, and we had artists literally sleeping in the studio. It was wild, but it was. I don't think I would have changed anything. Um, it was, and bear in mind, I was someone who had come from having not completed school to ultimately sort of guiding or being part of guiding an industry forward. Um, and so we got to meet some pretty cool people. A lot of the artists that came to South Africa, we actually we kind of moved our way in. I mean, I'm sure you can imagine how it is in the music industry. You try build as many relationships and connections. So when artists come into
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
country, you kind of try shimmy your way in any way you can. So we ended up connecting with artists like 50 Cent and G Unit on their trip here. Weirdly enough, about a week later, we were we were at the game and his crew at a time when they were beefing, so it was kind of weird. We met Nas, Busta Rhymes, some pretty big artists that when I was growing up I looked up to, still do,
Yeah,
obviously.
of course. Definitely.
And yeah, so I kind of got to quite a peak. Um, and yeah, just I think I kind of hit a brick wall at one point. Um,
Hmm.
just from the consistent running, going. And that was when I sort of decided to make quite a big career change.
Wow.
So, yeah, I mean, most people wouldn't get to a point and then sort of move on, but I had to make a
Yeah.
decision that was for me. Um, yeah. And so I eventually sort of took a bit of a break, went and lived with some friends of mine down in Cape Town. They were actually studying, so it was kind of weird. My friends were in their 20s and studying, and here I was still trying to discover what I wanted to do after having built a
Yeah.
pretty good career. Um, so yeah, and I think just out of interest, I sort of started speaking to my friends one day. Their uncle is quite influential in South Africa. He had built quite a lot of big businesses. Is quite well known. Sits on the top of the wealth list. At
Wait,
least,
wait, 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 wait. We're gonna have to put a pin in here. We're gonna have to pause this because we're closing the door on chapter 1 of your life story,
cool,
which I
perfect.
know we're about to go into a totally different zone here.
That's cool.
But
That's
let's
cool.
start with the first. So, first of all, you're talking about wrapping up an entire career that a lot of people would probably kill to have had, if I'm guessing. And,
Correct.
you did all the things right. You were successful. At what age did you stop the career of being a sound engineer?
I think it was quite a transitional phase. And
Okay.
it was by demand. Um,
Yeah.
having initially I was running the studio, but at the same time, once we started with the film side, I was needing to edit. I had to actually learn how to
Okay.
edit some of the times. And then at the same time, I had the radio show. So I had a lot of other things and commitments that were starting to naturally onboard themselves into my life. It wasn't really that I went out and like was seeking these opportunities. They ultimately just onboarded themselves. And so the transition of that was pretty clear. Just where was I needing to be? And I think at the time I was quite fortunate because I had access to sound engineers, having trained a few, as well as my lecturer was reaching out to me saying, I've got a few people who would like to come to Joburg. Could you help them? And I think at that point I was just like, just bring. If I can house them somewhere, like let me put them somewhere and let's get them to work. So
and did you buy a rental space, or what was the studio? Was it just a house? Was it your house, or did you buy a commercial spot?
It was actually my family's house at the start. So I was quite fortunate that, I wasn't paying rent. Obviously at the time I was 18, I started my own business, a little over 18. And I wasn't that good at that money management or anything at that time. I was really feeling my way in the dark, which I think was awesome. But at the same time, if I'd had the education, I would have probably done things quite differently. I probably wouldn't have been so bullish in the sense of just, like, let's go buy a video camera. We didn't even know how to edit. And when I say we, no one around me knew how to edit. So
wow.
It was really just trial and error. I think the first time we filmed something, we kind of sat with the camera in one hand and we had the computer. We were like, how?
How do I make this thing do anything?
Yeah, like how do we?
Yep.
We didn't think about this. So, and I think most people, and certainly now I do things differently. I research things a lot more before I actually get into them. I think maybe for a different purpose than most. I try to understand the skills. I'm really a skill-driven person, but we can get into that a bit later.
Okay.
And I just think I transitioned naturally into that space. And so essentially towards the end, I was running the record label. I was a sound engineer by trade, but I was really more doing executive production, sort of walking in, giving a thought process on it, working with the artists, that kind of thing. So it had transitioned quite a bit. I was actually hosting a vlog, which we eventually started creating to sort of keep the industry up to date. So we'd do like snippets of that, and then I'd have a team that would go out and film. So I was really managing all those pieces towards the end. Which, and I think that's also why I sort of burnt out. Yeah.
You burnt out, yeah. That seems like a perfect recipe for burnout. Actually,
just learning and doing. Exactly.
What was the primary revenue generator of that business? Was it mostly client work with audio engineering, or just a little bit here and there?
So it was kind of weird. It was a little bit of everything. So a lot of the times I was never really transitioning the artist from coming into the studio and paying. So I had a few artists that would, but I think, we were trying to, at that point, my view was quite different. I didn't understand business. So, it was really like, if we grow this, something will come from it. And so it was little bits of everything. We were really sort of stringing things together a lot of the time. And, with music comes entourage. So what is normally for hardworking individuals, and no discredit to a lot of the other people because they contributed a lot everywhere else. Let's be honest. There is part of a purpose behind entourage, but at the same time, you then also have another 4 or 10 mouths that also want food, so and you start providing for a lot of that. So we had artists that were making money, that were obviously providing a lot of money into what we were doing, and we were collaboratively sort of trying to grow. And that's
buying new gear, getting new microphones,
Yeah.
getting new plugins, all of the stuff that you need.
Yeah, so I think at that time it
Okay.
was really about living.
Just
I
just
mean,
enjoying yourself. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'd already put a lot of that stuff together, and as I said, it wasn't my mind wasn't really business
Yeah.
inclined at that time. So it was kind of really just like hand to mouth. A lot of the time we didn't have money management skills, and also it was about a mass. So when it's like the group of people want to do something, we were kind of just doing it. So um, yeah, I mean, like if you can just imagine the scenario, we were all sort of living and sleeping sort of in and amongst the
Yeah.
studio, like
I can
So
easily imagine my life wasn't terribly different for
yeah,
many years.
yeah. I mean, it was quite startup-y in the fact. I mean, bear in mind it was music, but it had that feel of like startup, like raw grit.
Mm.
Um, like
And you got to feel like you were on the forefront of something. You felt
correct,
like you were pushing an industry.
correct.
And it's funny you say that because like a lot of these stories, a lot of the mix engineers that I look up to, the Tony Maseratis, the Dave Pensado, all the people that I know that you must know as well,
Hmm.
they have a similar story, but their story was 30 years before your story. If you ask Tony Maserati how he got his start, he would say, I was the first person who raised my hand and said I'll mix hip hop in the US. So that wave
Interesting,
just
yeah.
came in your neck of the woods just a little bit later, I guess. So
Correct.
however many years later, you still had to be at the forefront of hip hop in your world.
Correct. So, I mean, I'm very fortunate. I mean, I think I've experienced a lot more than the general sort of, and no racial aspect, but general white South African. I mean, I've been to a lot of different places. I've experienced life, and I'm grateful for every last bit of it.
Yeah.
It's opened my mind. It's opened my perspective entirely. I mean, I've grown up quite fortunate throughout my life, but due to some of those interests, I had literally been to the most unfortunate places, and
Wow.
there's no judgment at all, because
Hmm.
I was about growing something. Um, we all had nothing in a sense. We were trying to make something from nothing. These are the tools we have, and what can we do with them? And how much impact can we have was, I think, really the mindset.
Absolutely. So you've done a lot of good things. You created a record label. You've got a podcast. You've got a radio show. You've got engineering. You're hiring more engineers. You're building this whole musical world. And then you decide to stop with music altogether, or what happened then? What was the thought process?
Yeah, so I mean, I think sort of towards the end, um, I think I just picked up a couple of things that I shouldn't have. If you know what I mean, we all get.
Yeah, I think we all know what you might mean. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I think one day when you just wake up and you kind of look at yourself and you think, well, number one, who am I and what am I doing? It's a bit of a scary question, and not everyone at the same time will see that or feel that. But when you do, you all of a sudden realize, and it doesn't involve anyone else at that point. It's almost like a survival thing. You kind of say, well, could I do this for the rest of my life and somehow feel either happy or survive? And so I think I had to make that decision. I mean, I was entering my 20s, so most people I think were really like looking for just to have fun. As where I was sort of looking at it and saying like, okay, I've lived a life where I've had 20 people around me or 10 people around me all the time. You know, do I foresee a girlfriend in my life? Do I, foresee this being something that I'm going to make a lot of money and be happy in?
Mm.
And then you see your physical appearance and what you may have transitioned into because of certain things. And
Yeah,
I was
sure.
shocked. And so I just had to kind of decide like what I want and do I think this path will deliver it for me? And
So you hit the brakes. You had a
yeah,
quick moment of like,
correct.
whoa, let's reevaluate fast.
100%. And it wasn't,
Okay.
do I not like this or was it, Do I not like the people? I mean, I loved every single person I was working with. Otherwise, I wouldn't be working with them. I'm really a person of choice. Like I have choice. And so, I just kind of had to make a decision. And so that was it. It was really just the
And
choice.
what was the decision that you made then? Because you're running it out of your parents' house, this empire. Clearly, you have people who are expecting things from you or have come to rely on you for various things. So how did you stop doing what you were doing? There was surely a fair bit of momentum there.
Of course it was. And I think a lot of heartbreak as well from not just myself, but also the people that I had also been supporting, and what we'd sort of built. It's never easy to sort of deliver the news of upset to someone. But as I said, unfortunately, I had to be very selfish. Not that I wanted to, but I had to. And I think, although I would have done things differently if I had the knowledge I had today, but I didn't. And I think at the time I was also quite emotionally driven. And when you kind of feel like you're trying to grasp any sort of vine while you're falling down a cliff, I think any vine that sort of seems somewhat secure that you can land on, exactly,
You're going
to grab it. And I've been to a friend's house just to kind of, while I was sort of trying to make this decision for myself, and he just looked at me and he said, "Hey, like, if you need somewhere, we got an extra room at our place." And obviously, I think he was home for holidays, and I just kind of thought, Cape Town was a good enough getaway. It was like, I think 1,600 kilometers or something, or 1,000 kilometers.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, So I had to sort of, and he just, I think it was him that, I'm forever grateful to him, obviously, for saying that and opening that opportunity of almost like escape, but like a safe room escape, like, hey, quickly come in here,
Yeah.
So yeah, forever grateful. And I think, that really kind of defined my next path. But it also allowed me enough shelter to kind of have the time to get through it. Because I think, I missed it. I went from someone who was seriously passionate about music and trying to change an industry to all of a sudden, literally overnight, having to just remove myself and almost put like an emotional block to prevent myself from sort of falling even further, if you know what I mean. It was a passionate
I do
thing
know.
for me. So it was
And
hard.
you're
it's like
left
giving up
with-
your favorite thing. Like,
Yeah. And you're saying, what now? Will I ever feel something as strongly as that thing that I gave up? Will I ever be as passionate about anything as I was about this thing?
correct. And I think
Is it even possible?
Also, it's something, once you kind of do that, it's like, how do you kind of go back?
Right.
It's kind of one of those feelings. Like, it's like, do I cut this now? And then after all of that, everything that I've done, and then could I even go back?
Could you even go back? Yeah.
Yeah, it was like, would I be accepted? And
Yep. Right.
yeah, it's like, it took me time to get there. So yeah, a very hard decision. But I think it's definitely, it was the start of a brand new journey that was just, I've found passion again.
Ooh, it's time to put a quick pause on everything and make sure, quick check, are you subscribed to the show? Have you rated it 5 stars on Apple Podcasts? Have you left a thoughtful review that will stroke my ego and make me feel good about myself? If not, please take time to comment, like, share the episodes that you enjoy with somebody who you think might enjoy them. Help me spread the word about this thing. Help me get it out there. I'd greatly appreciate it. Also, I'm constantly looking for a never-ending stream of unusual stories and talented and weird and special people out there doing all kinds of things. So if you know somebody, or if you know somebody who knows somebody, reach out, send me a message, drop me a comment, Tell me what you like. Tell me what you don't like. Tell me all the things. And let's grow this podcast together. Again, be an active listener here. Say hi, reach out, follow me on Instagram at the Ross Palmer, any of those things. I'd greatly appreciate it. And now back to the show. Because I remember when I did a similar thing in my life. I switched from, I was in music, and then I transitioned away. I had a kid. And then suddenly none of my life was about that. And I watched my friends' Instagrams. Many of them I've interviewed on this show. And they're at parties all the time. And there was a point where I had to unfollow a lot of them because I thought I can't keep looking at feeds of parties in my Instagram feed or it's going to make me go insane. So, and then you're watching a Queen documentary, you're seeing him do the clap and there's 200,000 people cheering. And then you're like, yay, digital marketing. That has just as much pep and zip. People are equally passionate about that. Ooh, let me sell you some shit online. Yeah. That's just as cool as something that changed your life. So I feel that very strongly. Yeah. Very strongly.
And I mean, that's actually another factor too. You really just enlightened something. I mean, we actually had, we were at a point where we would walk into clubs and clubs were like, your table's over here. And there's bottles on the table already. We didn't pay for it. Yeah. And it's I think for most people, that's the top. That's VIP. You are the VIP, right? So it's difficult.
Now you got your computer and a cup of coffee and you're great.
Your only audience is your keyboard,
Yeah.
Yeah.
People are like, you suck, man. No.
Exactly.
But you found passion again. That's the most important thing. And that's the greatest part of this show.
Correct.
So you found passion again. Now we're ready. Let's jump into this. What
Perfect.
happened then?
So, I mean, I think I did a lot of trial and error. I said to my friend, what does your uncle do? He was a billionaire in local currency. Does
that translate? What does that mean? Is that still a billionaire? Is that a millionaire?
I think it's just into the $100 million space.
Okay,
it's not bad. I mean, it's beyond ordinary. Yeah,
very
wealthy.
Bad, I mean, like Beyonce money, but can be better. Okay,
living well.
100 million.
Right. And so I'd kind of asked him. I was like, "What does your uncle do? I mean, he's clearly successful." And so I think they'd mentioned to me they were mining and minerals. I can't quite remember how they'd put it to me. I think he did a few things, but I think mining and minerals stuck out to me. So I thought, well, geez, if he's made so much money in minerals, surely I can make some, even a half, And I didn't know anything about minerals. I'd never thought of an industrial style business like this ever in my life. I just thought, wow, cool. Maybe I can buy a Ferrari. Yeah.
Hey, why not?
And I could kind of live that hip hop lifestyle again, So I kind of decided, all right, I'd had enough trying to work out what I wanted to do. So I left Cape Town, came back to Joburg, and I started researching what are minerals. Diamonds and gold and all these cool things came up. I was like, wow, that's flashy. That's cool. We're going to go do that. And so I think I'd met some guy when I'd started trying to venture into this path. And he was like, cool, I'm also keen. Let's go do diamonds. And so we jumped in my car. And
let's go do diamonds. I love it.
I think we literally went and we bought food parcels and we stacked my car with a bunch of stuff we could give away to people. And we drove off into one of the neighboring countries, Lesotho, because apparently they get diamonds. And we figured that, they're a bit more rural than sort of us. So we could probably get away with a bit more.
And drove into another country and you just thought, I'm going to come back with some diamonds.
Yeah, seriously, that was it. And,
if I hop in a car and go to Nevada and I'm like...
correct.
Sounds like a completely different world.
Yeah, I mean...
but cool, okay.
We figured we could kind of find at least an avenue to start.
You just ask somebody on the street and you just say, hey, you got any diamonds you're trying to get rid of?
Pretty much. It was that raw. So we drove into Lesotho and we sort of figured out this is the area we were going to go to. I mean, we were so ill prepared. We crossed the border and we lost all GPS signal. Like we didn't even know where we were. So we were like asking people like, where's this? And mountains. And we just kind of like drove off in a direction. Anyway, we found ourselves in the right kind of area. And we were literally like driving through the mountains and stopping and calling people over like, hey, come. Like give them food and beans and stuff and say like, where do we find diamonds? And they're like, no, keep going. And so we were really like, this was really like a silly way to do it. But I think the experience was awesome. And
Yeah.
we eventually ended up at some place. We ended up speaking to the chef at our hotel. I mean, we were this open about it. I don't even think I really understood that it was quite illegal. Um, I mean, you can't just do this. And I
I
think,
did not know that, but I believe you.
yeah. And he was like, no, we've got these friends of ours. They will help you. And I mean, we were so wet behind the ears at this point. We were like, cool. Anyway, we didn't even get real diamonds. We ended up speaking to these guys, and they were like, cool, we'll meet you on the other side. And we were so excited. I mean, we fled back into South Africa. We like met these guys in this little town. We like did this transaction. I mean, we didn't even know how to tell if it was a real diamond. Um, we had no idea. We just knew that there was some weight ratio. Then we got this like scale, and I think it was about as good as it got. And anyway, these guys sold us glass. Like it was well cut glass. I mean, it's actually quite an operation that these guys run. They do this. It's quite common in South Africa for new entrants into the space to have done the exact same thing and get burnt just like we did. And so anyway, we raced back to Joburg. We tried to sell these things. We like threw them on the table of this dealer, and he like put this thing on it, and it was like not even a noise from this little machine, like his little diamond tester. And we were like, that guy's trying to rob us. He's like trying to tell us it's fake. And then we just like, whatever, we'll leave it there. And so we were like not believing this guy at all. So we took it to a few people, and eventually we figured out, much to our own upset. I mean, I think we had lost quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
And we that was my first entrance into it. So I mean, I was definitely like, I'm clearly not going that route again.
Right.
That's a failing route. And so I started reaching out to a bit more experienced people than me, and I'd found my way to a goldsmith, third generation gold and diamond. Sort of, he had been a jeweler and he had done a lot in the gold space, and he had actually sort of helped me. I phoned him literally, I think, for 3 months, like every month. I was like, listen, I want to learn. He was like, no, like I'm not open to teaching people. And I was like, listen, I really want to learn. And he was like, no. And then I phoned him again, and he was like, listen, if you just make your way down to Durban and you meet me at the airport, like I'm pretty much going to tell you again, no, but like we'll give it a go. And so I did.
Okay.
And thank goodness, I think he actually saw like the passion in me. I really want to do this, and I want to sell gold. And he gave me the opportunity.
Wow.
He started by teaching me contracts, and bear in mind, I'm not someone who had come from even contracts in the music world. I was like we got burnt a few times purely because of that. So I was like, okay, I'm going to learn this outright. I literally like started reciting contracts like they were like songs almost. And I just started like that. Eventually, I kind of got lucky. We did quite a big transaction, much to like, I don't know how it worked. I didn't even really know like much about it. I just literally did the introduction. And then I struggled. So I'd kind of like come into it, and then all of a sudden like treated it as though it was quite easy. And, I've now kind of made like decent money, but I don't know how to repeat the process. And so I started trying to look into different minerals. I found that South Africa was home, and like, I mean, we quite mineral rich. So I started discovering that there were mineral groups like chrome and iron that we hold quite a lot of. And fortunately enough, there was some pretty close access. So in Rustenburg, which is about an hour out, um, was where most of these chrome mines actually exist. And
Whoa.
South Africa actually has, well, our sort of region, the SADC region, has about 83.6% of all the chrome reserves in the world. So I kind of figured, like, wow, okay, so this is definitely something that, someone in a lot of other competing countries I wouldn't be competing against a lot of countries. Let me give this a go. So I started out by just driving to mines, learning like mineral groups and understanding like what these minerals were. And bear in mind, I hadn't even learned business at this point. I was going to meetings, taking notes. I'd carry this little notebook around and I was like writing down words. People would say things like LC. And I'd be like, what is an LC? And I was too scared to ask. So I started just writing these things down so that I could, in my own personal time, go like learn them. So, I mean, I was really like, again, feeling my way in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started discovering that, okay, I need to start learning something. I really need to start like skilling up. I was nervous because I was like, how do I approach a university? I mean, no university is going to take a dropout. They're going to say, go back, finish school. And I was like, I'm not really interested in that. I was like, I couldn't be more embarrassed by trying to go back and complete like the final year of school. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, so I was like kind of in this weird spot. I was like, how do I learn? How do I advance? Like, but I'm too scared to ask. Like, what do I do? And so I just eventually just kept digging around online. I came across a college that was doing part-time courses of business management. And so I just called them up and I had this whole thing lined out. I phoned them. I was like, look, I've never completed school. I'd like already sold them this whole pitch. And they were like, it's part-time. You don't need to have any credits or anything to join. And I was like,
Just
what?
go for it, buddy.
Like, you just take me anyway? They were like, yeah, definitely. So I kind of like got the books. I was like ready to go. Like, I think 3 days before the course even started, I was like, ready to go. And I loved it. I mean, I think I walked into the class, and for me, the whole college environment was very new because I went to school and then I left school. And I think the last school I went to was not your typical school. It was quite naughty. So I ended up being in the equivalent type of environment around similar people.
Yeah.
And so like I kind of like walked in and I was like, wow, this is like in the movies, like, in like the multi-leveled sort of classroom. I was like, wow, okay, cool. I feel like I'm going to learn now. Like, this is amazing. Picked it up and
And in the back of your mind, you're thinking, I'm going to build a mining or mineral business with this knowledge.
Correct. I was so hungry. I mean, I was like, if my parents had sent me to college, I probably would have it would have been like a pain getting into class. I mean, it was. I would get to school, put my bag down, and I would leave, and then come back at like 4 o'clock when my dad was there to pick me up, and he's like, "I was school." I was like, "Cool." Meantime, I'd gone and I traveled in taxis, I'd like gone and experienced things, and I was quite naughty. So I smoked a bit of weed, and I would do that really in my school hours, then go through books. So now when I was in college or in this like school, I was kind of like, what? Like all of this has existed in books. I just didn't pay attention. Like
all of this has existed in books. That's going to be a tagline for this episode.
Yeah.
All of this has existed in books. Who knew, right? Who would have guessed?
That was it. And I think because
you're excited.
Yeah, I was mad excited.
It's not just something you have to do, it's something that you want to learn.
Correct. And I think that was probably the best gift I could have been given.
Wow.
Because again, like I'd said, if that was me just going through school, I would never have really paid attention. I would have like going to class was a pain for me. I 9 times out of 10 clashed with the teacher. So I just wasn't going to do it. It was painful.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, I just picked up the books and I started learning. I mean, it obviously started with the general sort of course overview. It was like, okay, cool, we're going to teach you a bit of financial, general business. We're going to teach you a bit about, actually like operational, how do you get all this together? And I was just like, what? So I mean, I was reading these books in my spare time. I mean, I was treating like a textbook, like a magazine eventually.
Were you running your business on the side at the same time? Were you directly saying like I learned this today, or did you pause the business until you finished your education?
So at this point, I was kind of a bit fortunate because sorry, and I did skip a little bit in sort of and how I got to the sort of the educational, but I mean, I'd already started I traveled China for a bit. I built some very good relationships. I'd ultimately taken my last bit of capital I had. I mean, when I sort of started getting into minerals, I had a good success, and then I started just declining. I mean, I was trying to learn. I was trying to, I was a broker. So what ultimately was happening is I would meet parties and take them out to the mine and introduce them. And because I didn't have, sort of legal knowledge and legal advice, I was kind of just really doing it on trust. So I was getting burnt left, right, and center. I promise you, I probably introduced, there were probably 100 deals made behind my back.
Wow.
And so be it. I mean, if that's the kind of, thing that you don't do and you don't protect yourself, it's a lesson you need to learn because it is pretty raw out in the world.
Sure.
When
Yeah, it
like
is.
people will take advantage of you, and I've certainly learned that the hard way. I mean, I've had some pretty painful experiences just purely because out of not doing the right things.
Mm.
And yeah, so I'd been into China, I'd networked quite a lot. I spent a month there, and literally I did this off whim. While I was brokering, I'd met a trader. She'd taken me in. She also taught me the ropes around actually trading minerals, which is the practice of pretty much going to a mine, acquiring the mineral, then packing it, testing it, and sort of readying it for export, and then ultimately exporting it to the end user, which is usually in our instance, it's the smelter. So they would buy the raw sort of material that has been either processed or in its raw form, such as what we'd call lumpy, which is just pretty much rocks, high mineral content, or you'd get like a concentrate or a fine, which is your processed. So it's normally been a lot of the other materials have been washed out, and it's now a higher grade material. And so we'd ultimately take that tested packet and then send it across the world to then get burnt.
To anywhere or to China particularly?
Pretty much.
Mostly China. Okay.
Correct.
From deals that you had made over there.
Correct.
And you went on a trip specifically to find buyers in China.
Correct. So, I mean, from here,
Cool.
I'd started just by searching online. I wasn't finding anything. So eventually and I think I reached out to one of the companies that does all the pricing, and I built a relationship with them. And through their network and my relationship with the person or the people, and the Chinese people are really great. If you are able to show value in sort of a direction, and there's several parties that are quite privy to a lot of these sorts of deals and networks. They're usually pretty open to letting foreigners in, so long as obviously you show like real good intent. And so, I mean, they introduced me. I mean, I think it was quite overwhelming. I think they'd actually set up like 45 meetings for me, and I was there for 30 days. I think I canceled like 15 just to literally give myself a bit of space. But it was amazing, and I learned something about new culture. I mean, that's a really different subject, but really I learned new things about their culture. Really an incredible place. But I'd networked with a lot of people there, and I was fortunate enough to be able to tie some deals together.
So would you say that at this point your mining business was successful? Had it taken off? Was it
Sure.
sustaining itself?
Sure.
Okay, so you're doing great.
Yeah, like
whoa.
And I mean, it was really just, I think the trader that had picked me up, and she was really an incredible, like like angel in my life, if you know what I mean. I'd met her, I took her
And
out to
she's
mine, and
Chinese?
no, she was South African.
Oh, the original. Okay, yes. Sorry,
Yeah,
I thought you might have said there was another one. Yep,
and
understood.
and taking her out to mine, and I think while we were driving there, she was like, "Why are you doing this?" I was like, "Well, I come from music, and I don't know how to do anything else right now." So, and I think because of that, she just said, "Look, I'll teach you the ropes." And so, I mean, I'd learned through her, and I'd helped them run part of their desk. So it was iron ore that they were initially running. And so, which is pretty much the same, it's a metal group. Um, and so through that, I just sort of started picking a bit of a lane. And obviously, we'd been burnt quite a bit doing it. It's quite common for the miners here to sort of offer you material, you pay for it, and I mean, again, it's a learning curve. It's quite an
And you
intricate
check it, and
process, really intricate.
it's just dirt.
Well, it is. It's sand, and if you think about
There's
it,
nothing in there.
I mean, if I go and throw a whole bunch of some other sand that is, in terms of mineral rich, it's got no mineral content. If I just like throw it into the batch, immediately I sway that ratio and those results. And so
Mm-hmm.
you can quickly find that you aiming to buy a 44% of a certain material, and all of a sudden you've moved it somewhere and you're realizing it's now 40.5, and it's a completely different pricing category.
Mm-hmm.
And now you've got literally like 50 truckloads worth of the stuff now sitting at a point.
50 truck.
But it's literally, when you think about it, I
Yeah.
mean, a truck does
Yeah.
30 tons, and volumes of 2,000 are small. You start realizing pretty quickly that
2,000 tons?
2,000 tons is small.
That's considered small.
Sure. So for a starting company,
Wow.
it's
Okay.
decent. For a company that's doing decent or has completed quite a couple of trades, it's usually small.
Okay.
So, but then again, you've also got to understand acquiring that kind of quantity is difficult. So it's really it's a super stressful business. There's a lot of moving parts to it. You've got to raise finance, and you've got to do like what they call a back-to-back agreement very, very quickly. So you have to negotiate with your seller on one side, and then on the other side, you have to negotiate with your buyer. And so your terms over here from your buyer have to be able to equally resemble the same sort of terms to your seller, so that you, as the person in the middle, have enough coverage in case something goes wrong. And there's a lot of factors. I mean, you've got mineral content and your
Yeah.
quality, you've got timing, and you got to get across the world. So
And you're having fun while you're doing
loving
this?
it.
Coming from music, you're loving it.
Loving it. There was like,
You're like, the stress.
yeah.
It's good.
Well, it was. I mean, I was
Okay.
stressed, but I kind of looked at it as like I'm helping sort of build. I'm helping the world like get its resources. You know,
Yeah,
like
right.
I was
You're
like,
helping the world.
I was
You're
making
helping me get my
music, and
iPhone. There you go.
correct. And I
Hopefully in
kind of
an
looked at it
ethical
as like that
manner.
was, well, I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
moving parts, right? So like, but I mean, it was. Certain minerals are obviously have that sort of ability to be sort of a lot more legally driven, where certain other groups don't attract much of that because of the, it's quite difficult and the risk is high.
Now, what about the regulations? I know country to country it's different, but is South Africa conducive to this kind of business, or were you constantly looking over your shoulder? I mean, because I feel like in some countries it might not be possible to do what you've done.
So I mean, obviously, I started in sort of the gold and diamond space, and you start working out pretty quickly. I mean, it's fairly simple. I mean, diamonds are small; they go for a lot of money. Therefore, it's very easy to package them or hide them and move a lot of money. Right. So when you think of it like that and you understand that concept, it's quite easy to attract. Like say I've got 10 million rand in South Africa and I legally want to move it out of the country. People will go and they'll buy diamonds, and sometimes it's as simple as this. They will buy a raw diamond. They will maybe weave it into clothing, or maybe even make a piece of jewelry that doesn't look like a diamond. So they keep it raw. They might just package it into like a little like casing and then wear it as a
Mm-hmm.
necklace. And you can do that and jump on a plane and travel out the country, and you might get through customs. And do you know what I mean? Like, so that's
Of
what
course.
certain
Yeah.
groups might do. And I've heard of
Right.
stories like that. So, when you understand that that's what people are doing, that's a good way to move 10 million rand out of the country
Wow.
without being noticed. So when you kind of look at it like that, you can imagine the groups that would gravitate towards being in that space. And I think for me,
Yes.
I kind of felt like I can't be going to meetings where I feel like I need protection or I might get
No.
killed.
Right. Like every 90s movie in LA ever.
Yeah, I was like, I'm just not set out to be like that gangster. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I may have come from hip hop, but I was like, that's just a little too gangster for me.
You
Like,
came from hip hop.
you know what I'm saying? Like, just a little too much. Like,
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot.
that's a lot.
Well,
And I know
okay,
some
so
pretty
you
hectic
graduate to
people,
other
but I was just
minerals,
like, this is not my style.
to
Like,
iron ore.
yeah.
But I do want to ask a quick question here because this is such a fascinating. I mean, anybody who would doubt that this is an unusual success story is
Super.
crazy. This is so interesting. I'm on the edge of my seat here. Um, but before we spend too much time, this isn't where the story ends,
No,
right?
I'm
It's
not
not like
even,
this is the only career.
I don't even
Right.
do
So
minerals
we have
then.
to, otherwise it's going to be like a 2 hour long show. So, all right. So
Sorry,
you have a successful, no, it's all good. You have a successful mining company at this point. You have broken into an industry from music to mining via a mentor of some kind.
Mhm.
And then you sell that business, you quit that business, you continue that business. What happens then?
So yeah, I mean, it's like this point, I'd sort of gotten to sort of that space where I'd now sort of started having these things run. I had 4 people that I'd sort of taken on, and now I was kind of I was kind of sitting there, and I was like, now I'd sort of start discovering that I could learn. And although I had learned a little bit online leading up to that, I'd kind of found Coursera. I thought this was cool. I literally clicked on every single course. I think I'd enrolled. If I was to find that account today, I'd probably have like the first like 50 courses that Coursera had ever released, kind of thing. And I'd like
Whoa.
enrolled to all of
Yeah.
them and done none.
Yeah. Yeah. I did that too.
Like excited, but yet overwhelmed, and therefore did nothing.
Mm.
So, I then sort of had a little bit of time, and that's kind of when I'd come across this college and started studying business management. And so I was just like, wow, like all of this is in here. Like, bear in mind, I'd studied a bit of minerals, like I'd kind of learned like the mineral groups. As a kid, I was quite good at the periodic table, but I think when I'd realized my 20s, like, hey, the periodic table and these mineral groups that sit on this mineral report are actually, wait, they're the same thing.
Right.
I kind of
It's
was
not
like,
just abstract.
wow, like, so I started there. And then when I started discovering that business management existed, I was just off to the races. I'd finished that course. I failed it, by the way. I think I even rewrote it and I failed again. I'm not very good at transitioning my learnings onto paper. Probably pretty equally aligned with my youthful school experience. But nonetheless, I was enamored. Like I was literally, it was like a kid finding a new toy. Like, wow, education, cool. And it was weird because I'd actually taught, although it was obviously a bit more of sound engineering and more of a creative skill
Hands-on,
set.
practical.
Correct.
Right.
When I discovered that business was quite a subject and was actually quite advanced in teaching, and that anyone could kind of learn, I started. So I did business management, financial accounting. I did some legal studies all online, and then I started trying to build additional businesses. So while I had this running in the back, I started looking into other businesses. I started venturing into a path of IoT. A friend of mine's father had done it made these devices using RFID. And my thinking in the initial start was, I wanted to be able to have a bit more of an understanding of what the mineral journey was and potentially tie some technology into that. And so when I saw these IoT devices, I thought, well, surely there's something here. And like I might be creating something into a very new space, but like I want to understand this technology thing because I think it's really cool. And I want to try and employ it into the businesses I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
And so eventually I sort of latched onto my friend's dad, and he said, listen, my stepson also wants to start a business. Maybe you two should do this together. We met, we hit it off like house on fire. I think we had heard of each other through the grapevine, through friends. When we had actually met each other, we felt like naturally, we were like, wow, cool, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Like we both similarly aligned. Let's do this technology thing. Like he had come from a marketing background. I'd obviously been learning business management, and I'd done the sort of mineral business. Like I'd shown that I could go into something completely new and really do quite well. And we started this thing. We ran out, started creating business plans. I mean, of course, I just studied business management. It was like everything needs a business plan, everything needs a financial model. Like it was just like over the top, but we did it anyway. Like we ran out, we pitched to large scale businesses. We were getting the right sort of airtime with the right people, but we hadn't actually quite known what to do with technology. So we didn't test a lot of this stuff. We were just kind of like, cool, like his dad's older than us. He's done a lot of this. This is really cool. And we would start getting contracts or the opportunities, and we were getting dropped. So either the technology wasn't ready, or for some reason it just wasn't available when it was supposed to be. And it was just kind of weird. But we were not sure. I mean, I didn't even know how to build a website, like on Wix or anything like that. I mean, like every time I try to build a website online, I was like, these online builders, I was like, geez, this looks horrible. Like, I'm not even putting this out. Like,
yep.
It looks cheesy. And so, I mean, that's as far as I'd gone with technology. So now throw these little devices into the mix, and these things talk to each other without any cables and wires. And I was like, way over my head. But I knew business, and so I was going to figure this out. So, and that was it. I mean, it was clearly like a good recipe for failure. We didn't do well. We fell straight on our face. I think but good on us. We tried right until the end. We try to bring on new people. We brought in developers. We try to understand like how this technology thing worked. But in the time we had and sort of the companies we had introduced all of this stuff to, we weren't going to save it, right? So I started tasting this raw like grit of failure. Like it was horrible. And so I think that was quite an eye opener for me. And I think that's sort of when I started sort of having to sort of either start deciding like, where's my alignment? What am I focused on? And I think like with that failure, I'd put so much into it. I mean, we wanted to be tech millionaires at that time. I mean, we were like, every deal we were counting the cents. Like we were like, this deal is going to make us X amount of money. And we hadn't even like tested the technology. It was a bit weird, but I think everyone gets into a cycle like that once you've learned business for the first time, because you start discovering financial modeling and you start doing all these cool, crazy things, and you start seeing all these amazing numbers, and you're like, what? That's possible. Like, whoa, how much did we make? Like, and then the only thing you're interested in is profit. And I mean, it was exciting, but we never closed any of them. I mean, I think the one deal was like, we would have been like 400 million in on like the first year. It was like ridiculous. So the equivalent of about $30 million for you.
Right.
So we were like, yo, wow, this is amazing. Like, imagine we could be like, I think at the time it was like Mark Zuckerberg.
All good stories start with, I'll be $30 million richer in a year. That's always worked out from everybody I've talked to.
straight up. Like, so yeah, that was like I'd taken this newfound love for business and sort of employed it in.
And you applied it in a way that didn't work. So that business didn't work.
Correct.
And then subsequent businesses did,
No,
or still work in
no.
progress?
So I mean, I had the mineral thing going on, but
Yeah.
I'd found technology. I'd started a business with my family as well. At this time, I mean, I thought business was quite easy. So I was like, all right, to simplify this, I'm going to spread my wings quite far. I'm going to do a couple of
Mm.
different businesses, and that way, if three fail, or like if five failed out of 10, at least I got another five. And so I wouldn't suggest it, but I did it,
This is from the
and I
guy
was
who was
like,
burnt out before, by the way. This is
yeah,
the guy who said earlier that he got
correct,
burnt out when things started just piling on his shoulders. Here we go again.
correct. And I did it a few times. I mean, I burnt out a few times purely for that reason. I mean, I did. I was
Yeah.
trying to do like technology, and I was trying
Faster,
to do
faster,
this,
faster.
and it was. I was just like faster, 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 faster. And I was like, it's
Yeah.
okay. We'll work it out when success comes. And
Mm.
so yeah, I went through a bit of a cycle. I mean, we started a real estate agency that fortunately like was backed by my family. So my family had been in real estate for 30 years. It's always been a well-oiled sort of machine
Hmm.
to a sense. It's not huge, but it works.
Yeah.
And my mom's
Okay.
been successful at it for 30 years. So,
Wow.
and I had this
Cool.
vision of how to take real estate into this sort of technological idea that I had, and had no technical background. So I focused on the business plan, the financial model. Um, I'd sort of like looked at how to sort of transition that space from a traditional world into sort of a bit more digitally orientated. We had an incredible business plan, but we didn't know how to do anything. Like I didn't know how to custom build technology. I didn't know how to navigate
Hmm.
that at all. So I was going out to development companies and saying, listen, I've got this cool idea. Invest your team of developers and we're going to make this. And um, I don't think the developers at the time were like looking at this as a business case. They were like, well,
Yeah.
how much are you going to pay us? And I'm like, well,
Right.
I don't quite have what you
Our rate
want,
is this
but
much per hour. Yeah.
and because I didn't know how to navigate it, it was also a bit, like how do you go and throw money at something you don't know? Like
Hmm.
you don't even know if you're paying for good quality or you're paying for bad quality because you
Yeah. You
don't
have
even know
no
how to
idea.
tell. And so that was it. And I think I got, we started trying to, I had one ability or sort of entered a competition in a sense where I had to pitch, and it was quite long. It was like a 3 month run up. We had to join, pitch to earn a spot at this event overseas. It's actually Rise. It's a well-known tech event. I think it was the largest in Asia at the time. Probably still is. I don't know what events are
Wow.
happening now, but they
Yeah.
definitely are a leader. And
Yeah.
we figured this would be a really good way to kind of uh, get investment. Being in South Africa and the business having been in South Africa, it's not usually the most attractive investment place or sort of country. Usually, international investors are not that interested because our exchange rate is quite bad. It can fluctuate very quickly, um, and so we weren't in a good position, and we were looking for ultimately money to build our idea. And at the time, this seemed like that's the way it worked. Um, but we slowly started figuring out that no one's going to give you money to validate an idea unless it's your best friend. And I didn't have too many of those at the time because I'd just been learning for the last couple of years and running in multiple directions. And so I think, I eventually, again, sat down, okay, cool, let's reevaluate. Where am I sitting? And I kind of had this tech idea in real estate, and I had this mineral business, which was doing really well. I'd set up some contracts overseas. And although it was running, it was costing a lot to run. I wasn't directly hands-on at that stage because I was also out running around trying all these new things, and it sort of started withering. And I had a company which, when I'd started the business, we'd kind of crossed each other's paths a few times, tried to work together. We just, I think, different types of people, different types of personalities. We didn't really get it right. We were doing the same sort of thing. So therefore, we immediately built, like, although we didn't have any issues, I think it was almost like a competition thing. Hey, we're same level. Let's go for it. And eventually they said, hey, listen, what would you want? And I said, well, it's more stress to me than anything else. I want to run out and I want to spread my wings and do a couple other things. And so, yeah, that was when I'd made this sort of decision to sell it. I think personally, I'd also started discovering, who I was. I kind of started looking around and realizing like, hey, wait, minerals are actually quite destructive in the way we get them. I mean, you start growing, you start learning, and you start discovering new things. I'm very inquisitive person. So my typical day, if I think of something, I start searching it and researching it, and I learn new things all the time. But yeah, I mean, that for me was a lifesaver, because it's given me a lot of space later on in my life to do these transitions and consistently develop my skills and have the space and comfort to do that.
You mean financial space or
correct,
time space?
Correct.
Okay.
So
you had a successful exit of a company, and that
exactly
helped fund the rest. Cool.
So I've used that, and that's part of my next sort of where I'm sort of based now. So I think we can close off this chapter.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Because it's long-winded.
This is already the longest one we've had so far, but it's also the most turns. So without going too much farther into it, let's just what are you doing now?
So I mean, I think,
what is your current thing?
And I think, now I've been able, and thank goodness I've been able to sort of really refine it. It's taken me all those years of a bit of pain. I mean, a lot of the times I'd sat there learning all the time. I went through a couple of years where I've just learned solely, just spent time learning. And that's been greatly part of my latest transition. So I went from, having this tech-based business, or this idea for this tech-based business, not being able to action it, but kind of sitting at this crossroad where I'm like, okay, I tried tech before. Am I going to fail at this again, or am I going to really acquire the right skills? And so I've always been interested in things, and doing stuff, and been kind of good with my hands, but I've also been quite a creative, and I've liked a spread of different things. So I've got digital design skills. I've got obviously all the business skills that I'd acquired. I'd learned animation, digital design. And then I kind of sat and I said, do I learn technology? And I decided that I wanted I'd seen a gap that a lot of traditional sort of businesses had never really transitioned into technology. And I felt that being someone who had come from different industries, I could see unique ways to use technology into furthering businesses and automating them. And so I kind of started running in that direction. And I'm really glad I did, because I think through discovery and the learning curve that was required to learn the skills that I have in tech. I mean, I'm very explorative. I mean, I've learned everything from payment solutions to blockchain, to web development, mobile development, and then all the little areas around how do you automate the business. So legal technology, I've developed lots of different stuff. I mean, I spent 4 years, thank goodness, with the ability to just literally build and trial everything. So I've spent a lot of money, but I'm now at the point where the infrastructure that we own as a holding company, because I just set up a business to kind of use that as exploration. I was like, if I build a business and I ultimately build a whole bunch of tech and I throw all that tech into this business, I've got all the pieces I need to build any startup. And
Mm.
so I explored everything. I mean, we've got e-commerce platforms that we've built. I built like a sort of, tried to get a job when I sort of started learning technology, and I was like, okay, I need to somehow find some additional money, because it's tough burning money and not earning money. So you
Hmm.
kind of feel like you have to sort of somehow balance it.
Yeah.
And so I
Right.
built a recruitment sort of system, but from the reverse. And so essentially I sold that. So that gave me additional bit of extra float at a point.
Okay.
But the rest, I've been building solutions and stacking them into our holding company. And I mean, we've got some pretty cool stuff, really a lot around sort of business automation. I've got some cool things around blockchain, and that has kind of brought me to where I am today. And so just recently acquired a new partner. So a lot of the times I've built startups purely or businesses purely on my own. Um, and so I've just recently sort of acquired a partner. He's a bit more financially secure than I am, um, but he's seen in sort of a vision. And what we've looked at is how do we do and implement a lot more technology into Africa and
Yeah.
start trying to transition. So yeah, that's kind of where I've sort of ended up today. I'd love to speak
Wow.
more, but like we've got some approvals we're waiting on before I can explain exactly what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty
But
fascinating. So,
yeah,
would you say your passion then is entrepreneurship? You say you found a new passion. What in all of this would you say you're passionate about then?
so I think like from all of that, and I think one of the greatest takeaways that I could give or share to anyone is don't be afraid to explore. I'd reached certain sort of areas in the sort of paths I'd chosen, and although like I had done a lot and experienced a lot, there were certain times where I was not happy. And because of the success, I'd kind of hit that crossroad where like, do I leave this to seek happiness? And like, to be honest, where I am today, I mean, I live with my laptop. And as weird as it sounds for most people, like a lot of people want to be out there, hands on doing stuff. I get that ability. I can work from anywhere in the world, and I, I'm building a pretty amazing team at the moment, and it's I find the happiness that I've been able to learn. I'm able to do what I want to do on a daily basis. I'm initially that love and passion I had for music of creating, I'm doing now. I'm just doing it in technology,
Mm.
which happens to be a bit more financially beneficial
All
or
right.
at least the opportunity to be a bit more financially sort of compensated better than music.
Yeah.
Not to say
Sure.
that they don't do the same, but I'm doing that. I'm also able to learn daily because I'm learning every day. I'm filling that gap of the need for new, fresh things. And I think as a person, I go through days where I don't have those big dips because I'm doing
Mm.
the things that I love. And
That's the holy grail. Yeah.
that is it, and I think that like the greatest thing that most people can have, and I think, a lot of people that may have struggled, I mean, I struggled. It sounds like a cool journey and it sounds like a cool story, and like, hey, that's like hats off to you, you went out and did it. I mean, a lot of other people have done just this, a lot of other people haven't. A lot of people are scared to do these things. um, it's leaving comfort zones, a lot of the time, but through all of that journey, I've discovered, I met a lot of amazing people. I've seen completely different backgrounds. I've gone from the most lowest income sort of areas to, some of the wealthiest. Um, and I've seen the perspectives, and what I've been able to take from that is that by finding your happiness, you can achieve anything. Um, I mean, I say to a lot of my friends, sometimes they'll sometimes say to me like, they're doing or they're stuck in a certain field and they have this really big idea, and they feel like the idea is so big that who are they to do it, deliver on it? And they feel that you need to be a certain stature, or you need to have a certain background, or you need to, just know certain people. I mean, all of that comes in time. But when you find something that you're passionate about, those people naturally gravitate towards you. And when you do
Mm.
meet them, when they see the passion that you have for that, I mean, it's contagious. And I mean, I met a guy a couple of years ago. I stopped a guy from jumping off a bridge, and I think that was quite a big transitioning point for me because I started noticing that like he wasn't happy because he hadn't found something. And I
Mm.
was fortunate that I was in this position where I could explore a lot and find something. We get caught up a lot of the times by the people that we keep. And, if you actually listen to yourself and you try find a bit of silence to find that, you'll actually find that you can, you'll start at like being inquisitive
Mm.
instead of going out and drinking every weekend. Or, I mean, I've stopped drinking alcohol and I've absolutely nothing against it. And the
Yeah.
reason I
Yeah.
stopped was just because I found the desire to, I was inquisitive. I wanted to understand, how do you do digital animation? Or how do you sort of, how do payments work? Like, really, I mean, if you've ever thought about it, how does money go from one country to another country? And how do these things happen? And is there a
Yeah.
way to make this better? And we need people like this in the world. Um, and technology and laptop and cell phones. Most people sit on and we go on Instagram all day. Um, we don't understand that little like device. I mean, I've learned solely online. I
Yeah.
went to a college, but I've gone from being someone who was like literally a dropout with no real. I think the last few years of college, I didn't even really pay attention. I think the year before I'd actually like beg, like, please don't fail me, because it's just not gonna look cool when I'm like young. I mean, older in a younger grade kind of thing. And I think the school was like, okay, kind of things. So I mean, I was really like, I wasn't an achiever. I mean, like me and achievement were like, how much could this guy disrupt the class today?
Hmm.
And I've kind of gone to someone like become someone, and purely this is just out of time, energy, and effort. It's not. I didn't. It's just desire to be someone different, and I think I wanted more. And I've gone from being that to, I mean, I can do digital animation in Blender to designing a logo to writing a full scale business plan and a financial model, to actually building the mobile application as a prototype or full scale product. And I don't say that in any way for people to be like, oh wow, it's in no way a sort of look at me, but more of a, you can do it too.
Hmm.
And like, it's like I say, education in a lot of instances has become free.
Yeah.
If you jump on Coursera, you can pick up a new skill set, and you can, for 2 years, every second week, pick up a brand new skill set by spending 2 weeks, even if it's just on the weekend, learning how to do something. And you can find that passion. And all you need to do is find that passion and run with it. Uh, and I think the best thing that I could ever say to someone is like, if you are
Yeah.
unhappy, don't be scared to jump and learn something new, no matter how old you are or what your background is. Because you could go from being that person sitting in a bedroom with no opportunity, um, and you could transition yourself into being sort of the next Elon Musk. And I strongly believe that, you know, if you look at journeys of people like Elon's, they're all pretty much the same in some thread. They've all struggled, struggled, struggled. They've eventually found something that they've felt passionate about and that they wanted to change, and they've run off and done it. And 9 times out of 10, sure, relationships and position and where you are do equate to something, but they had to build themselves to get there, you know.
Yep.
And I think it's
Well, I think
the
that's
greatest
a
thing. Yeah,
yeah, that's a great place to end it, I think. That's
brilliant.
that's what a story, man. I think that's great advice. I need some of that myself. As somebody who has gone through many transitions, I'm still in the searching phase, I guess you could say. I'm still in the discovery phase myself, but I love this story.
But
It's
I
really
think,
cool. And
yeah,
I'm glad our paths crossed.
so am I. I mean, I love your
Thanks
content,
for reaching
Ross.
out, man. Oh, thank you very much. No, thank you for reaching out and for getting in touch. I had no idea that it's a really cool story. And let's stay in touch. Who
Thanks.
knows how our paths will cross in the future, but I really appreciate you sitting down and taking the time to share this. I think when I set out to showcase unusual success stories, this was exactly the kind of thing that I had in mind, but I didn't know exactly what it would look like. So thank you for bringing this to me.
Well, I'm glad I could share, and I think that was why I reached out.
That's
I've had a unique story, and
it's awesome.
it's
You do,
non-traditional at all. Like,
No,
I
you have 3 unique stories, or 4, or 5.
yeah. I think I
Most
lived
people
a
be
full
lucky
life
to have
by the
one.
time I was 21.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah. And thank you.
Well,
I
will wrap
appreciate
it
the
up
opportunity for me to
go easy on
share.
her. Of course, let's stay in touch, man. And I will just wrap it up now so our listeners don't go so insane. But I hope that they've enjoyed it. It was a lot of gold in there, and you and I will talk
Thanks,
after
Ross.
the fact.
Appreciate it.
But with that, the podcast is officially over. Thanks for listening to the Beat the Often Path podcast. If you've been enjoying this show, please like, comment, share, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to me on YouTube. It would mean the world to me. Also, do you have an unusual success story, or do you know someone who does? Well, please recommend them to me. They could be a future guest on this show. Maybe they've rolled the largest boulder down the mountains of Tibet, or maybe they built the world's largest chicken farm in Madagascar. The point is, I don't know what I don't know, so I'm looking for inspiration and unusual success stories. So help me by being a part of this adventure. I'm looking to grow this podcast with you. Thanks again for listening.